Bitcoin is being attacked by its own developers. And in this video, I want to explain to you what exactly I mean by this. Let's get started. I want to start with this video called Bitcoin Core 30 is a CSAM relay service from Matthew Cratter's Bitcoin University. CSAM is inappropriate pictures of children. So let's go into this video. Let's watch this and go through what exactly is happening here.
This is Matthew Cratter's Bitcoin University. Today is day 3 of discussing yet again a completely horrific topic. Today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin Core 30 software version 30 as being a CSAM relay service. And today's video is a follow-up to yesterday's video, which was called Will Blockstream Filter Out CSAM. I'll put a link to it in the description notes below. CSAM, of course, is one of the most horrific things in the world. It stands for child sexual abuse material. Quick summary of yesterday's video. Bitcoin Core is making changes to its node software beginning in October with version 30 Core.
I believe this is going to be happening at the end of October. So this is actually a really important video to watch before that happens. And I think that if a lot of people do actually end up running Core 30, as Matthew will point out here, there will be non-monetary transactions, non-monetary data being held on Bitcoin. And this could include things like inappropriate pictures of children and videos of children. And it's terrible to even think about.
30, which will by default increase the amount of non-monetary data that nodes running the software will relay to each other. And it has plans to completely remove all configurability of this a few months later. They're raising the effective non-monetary data cap from 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes for op returns.
So what that means is they're allowing people to post bigger and bigger files on the Bitcoin network. Before this core version 30 update, they would have had 80 bytes as a limit to how much data somebody can post on the Bitcoin network. And now they're going to 100,000 bytes. So what exactly is 80 bytes? And I think this is important to understand because I don't know if many people really understand what 80 bytes means. So 80 bytes can store roughly 80 characters of text or several short numbers or other data points. So in a way, the amount of data that you can put in an 80 byte op return is not that much. It's not going to, you can't really put anything significant on there. You can't really put pictures on there. You can put pieces of pictures and then people can piece those pieces together. They can basically like almost use it like a puzzle. They can put it together and then they can see whatever they want to see or share whatever is being shared that can be shared. But now, instead of 80 bytes, Bitcoin Core is trying to increase that to 100,000 bytes. So that goes from 80 characters of text to 100,000 characters of text, which is 1,250 times more data. And something very similar to this happened with Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision BSV, where they made a change almost exactly the same. Lop's post about BSV's 1 gigabyte op return limit got me thinking about Grass-Fed Bitcoin's recent tweets about the increased limit allowing people to add CSAM to Bitcoin transactions. It seems that immediately upon increasing the op return limit to 100 kilobytes, BSV had their first incident. So they increased it to, it seems like 100,000 bytes. And immediately somebody started posting CSAM and these pictures of children. And you can see here, after Bitcoin SV, BSV node developers and miners lifted the op return data size limits to 100 kilobytes, activity immediately took off as users started posting text, videos, and pictures. Unfortunately, among these posts were apparently not yet confirmed a piece of illegal content involving alleged child exploitation material, the Next Web reported. The content was posted via a transaction processed by MoneyButton. It was later discovered on bitcoinfiles.org, which proceeded to remove the content from the site after receiving a notice from their local authorities about the nature of illegal content viewable on their website. According to the MoneyButton, Bitcoin Files contacted them, suspecting that MoneyButton may have been the tool that criminals used to write this content on the blockchain. So as soon as BSV updated their limit from 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes, or 1 gigabyte, I'm not sure of the exact details, somebody started posting exactly this. Somebody started posting exactly what Matthew Cratter is talking about in this video. And one of the craziest things here is that a lot of people are attacking Matthew for saying that this could happen, but you have to understand that the people attacking Bitcoin, they've been trying to do this for a very long time, and they've been thinking about this for a very long time. So I think one of the craziest things here is, how do we know that Bitcoin isn't being attacked by its developers? How do we know what their true intention is? How do we know that they're not being paid under the table to do this by companies like Citria? So we can see here, Citria is a company, they're trying to create a layer two. I don't know the exact details of this, but what they're trying to do here is, you can see here, significantly increase transaction throughput and reduce fees, making Bitcoin more usable for a wider range of applications beyond simple value transfer. So they want Bitcoin to be used for something other than money. Why do we need to use Bitcoin for anything other than money? Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is global money. And the best thing about Bitcoin is that it's the best money because it's only used as money. When you start branching out, when you start becoming the master of multiple things, you become the master of nothing. So if people start using Bitcoin for things other than money, think about all of the developers who are going to start focusing on trying to create even more use cases and wasting their time and destroying the Bitcoin network. Today, Bitcoin is supposed to be a way to transact. It's supposed to be a way to move value from one person to another. And Bitcoin Core seems to be challenging this. They want Bitcoin to be used for other things. They're claiming that there's a security budget problem. They're claiming all kinds of things. But you have to understand that Bitcoin's hash rate has only gone up over time, even though the rewards have decreased. The rewards for mining Bitcoin have decreased by 50% every 4 years. And they went from 50 Bitcoin all the way down to 3.125 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. You can see here, the hash rate is only going up. So the first halving was in November of 2012. And since then, you can see here the numbers of hash rate have pretty much just gone parabolic, and nobody really seems to care that the reward has halved. All they care about is dedicating their energy and their time to the Bitcoin network so that it becomes more powerful and it becomes more secure. The hash rate is the amount of energy being dedicated to Bitcoin. And it seems like people are claiming that because Bitcoin's reward won't be enough going forward, the hash rate will fall. So, what they're trying to do in this case is they're trying to increase the amount of transaction fees that miners receive for creating Bitcoin blocks. But the reality is that it doesn't seem like miners really care. The transaction fees are already so minimal. You can see here, the transaction fee was $4,319 in the last block out of $364,616 as the total reward for the block. So over $360,000 were sent to that person as the subsidy, and then they received $4,319 as the total fees. So I think the key takeaway here is that I don't think miners are going to leave the Bitcoin network just because the reward is decreasing. And I don't think we should focus on solving the problem of not having enough transactions on Bitcoin because most people haven't figured it out yet. I think Bitcoin is just going to keep growing, and the subsidy is just basically a way to get Bitcoin off the ground. But going forward, the transaction fees will increase on their own. And we don't need companies like Citria trying to make Bitcoin more usable. All that Citria wants to do is they want to create BApps, which are Bitcoin apps on Bitcoin, so that they can create shitcoins and they can create all these other kinds of use cases that make it so that Bitcoin has more transactions other than the monetary transactions that we see on here. All right, and let's go back to the video here.
Itself, going from 80 bytes to 100,000 bytes, especially since we've had 80 bytes for about a decade, at least in Bitcoin Core. But it gets even crazier. And now I'm going to have to be really blunt here. So please excuse the fact that Bitcoin Core's absolute recklessness here is forcing me to have to discuss this disturbing subject again. So here it goes. 80 bytes of op return is not enough data to create the kind of graphic images or videos of illegal explicit content involving minors, what we call CSAM. We can also call it CP. It's not enough data to create the kind of graphic images or videos that pervs want to see. If we do look at this Google search, creating a true 80 byte image that is displayable by common image viewers is highly challenging due to the overhead of image file formats, etc. So 80 bytes is not a whole lot of data. But by contrast, 100,000 bytes is more than enough to create very graphic images and even short videos of this kind of content. So come October or whenever this software updates.
So like I said before, 80 bytes can store roughly 80 characters of text, while 100,000 bytes will be able to store a lot more data, and it'll allow people to transmit pictures of CSAM CP through the network And at some point, some of those pictures are going to be confirmed on transactions. They're going to be added to the blockchain and they'll never be removed again. They'll be on there literally forever.
Least any Bitcoiner who wants to run a Bitcoin node using Bitcoin Core will download this software. And if they run it using the default settings that have been chosen by Bitcoin Core devs themselves, they will be actively relaying large unconfirmed op return transactions all around the world that contain whatever crazy arbitrary data people or governments or whoever choose to put in them. And
This is almost like having a hard drive in your house and having anybody connect to it and they can post whatever they want on that hard drive. They can upload whatever videos they want, any pictures, whatever they want to. They can put that on the hard drive and you're trusting these people to not be absolute monsters. You're trusting them and you're thinking that they're not going to try to post any kind of negative pictures on your hard drive. They're not going to put illegal pictures on there, illegal videos. You're expecting some random person online to do this. And in this case, it would probably be somebody who's completely anonymous and you can't track them. So once they get that picture or that media on your computer, on your node, how are you going to reverse it? You really can't. You can't get rid of it at that point. It's on there. And any data that goes on a computer, I'm sure there's probably some way to scrape that data and to get that data off your hard drive and implicate you for a crime that you maybe didn't even know you were committing.
unfortunately, it's quite likely that that non-monetary data will contain CSAM. It might contain a lot of CSAM, unfortunately. This is the point at which the technical people who are the technocrats, you might call them, are saying, but they're paying transaction fees and helping to support the Bitcoin security budget. Yeah, sure, you can be an apologist for CSAM, but this is not an argument that I'm prepared to make. If you were a nation state attacker, wouldn't you love to flood the Bitcoin network with CSAM and then use that as an excuse to turn public opinion against Bitcoin and Bitcoiners? Are you tired of having to explain to your aunt that you're not a professional drug dealer or terrorist just because you
What Matt is saying here is that if node runners update to Core v30, at some point there will be some kind of CP, some kind of CSAM, some kind of inappropriate pictures on their computer. And the world is just going to associate Bitcoin with that. They're not going to associate Bitcoin with money. They're going to find a way to make it so that Bitcoin's reputation is ruined. And one of the reasons why I think that this could be a nation state level attack is because nation states are directly threatened by Bitcoin. They can't print Bitcoin. They can't create more Bitcoin to make it so that they can stimulate their economy. They have to have people in their economy who are creating actual value. Because of Bitcoin, they can no longer manipulate the economy and control how people transact, how people behave. And this could be a way for nation states to collude and try to destroy the Bitcoin network. And maybe getting to the developers is the easiest way to do that. Any other way that they try to do this won't work. So, this is essentially a warning that if you run Bitcoin Core 30, you're falling for that trap and you're probably going to be implicated in some kind of crime that you didn't even mean to commit. And as a Bitcoin node runner, you're going to be held accountable.
use Bitcoin? Are you looking forward to having the same discussion with friends and family and having to defend CSAM once unscrupulous politicians and the mainstream media learn what's been happening?
Why would you even give this an opportunity to happen? Why would you give somebody the opportunity to put CSAM, all these pictures, all this inappropriate media on your computer when you don't have to, when you can just not run Bitcoin Core 30? If you could run something like Bitcoin Knots, it is another implementation of Bitcoin where you have the filters. The filters are still intact. On the other hand, with Bitcoin Core 30, they've removed the filters. On Bitcoin Knots, you can still have the filters. You know that the only transactions that are going on your node are monetary transactions. You're completely removing the possibility of somebody uploading CSAM on your computer. And again, the worst part here is that the Bitcoin Core supporters seem to be attacking Matthew Crater for even imagining that this could happen when it's already happened. I showed you this. It already happened in the past. It's already happened. It's already been done. There is no guessing that this could happen. Matthew isn't making this up in his head. All of this is just history repeating itself. And this is why Luke Dash wanted to create Bitcoin knots. Bitcoin knots is a way to make sure that this never happens on a Bitcoin node. And this is what Matt is referring to here. The number of Bitcoin core nodes is at 18,834. The number of Bitcoin knots nodes is at 5,882. And you can see here the number of nodes is increasing, but the number of Bitcoin core nodes is decreasing. Bitcoin knots is going absolutely vertical. You can see that here. You can see the chart where near the end of it, in more recent times, you can see it just keeps going up, and it'll continue to go up because people don't want to have CSAM on their computers. They don't want other people to use their home computer to send and receive inappropriate pictures. Why would they intentionally want this? So you see here that the number of people running Bitcoin Core is steadily decreasing, and it'll probably keep decreasing for a very long time until Bitcoin Knots is the main Bitcoin implementation. It's the reference implementation of Bitcoin, and only Bitcoin Knots is being used. I think that this number is going to go to 50% or more. It's already at 23.76%. At one point, it was less than 1% of total nodes. So, how do you solve this problem? Instead of running Bitcoin Core version 30, which will have no filters, you run Bitcoin Knots. You make sure that this problem isn't yours to deal with when inevitably people do start sharing CSAM on the Bitcoin network. The important thing here is that you can already post transactions that have more than 80 bytes of data on them. And you can do that through Marathon's Slipstream platform, their portal. Essentially, it's a way for them to bypass the network. And you can see here, the company supports permissive nodes and transaction accelerators that give non-standard transaction generators the opportunity to pay extra for getting their transactions included in our blocks. The company is not guaranteed to include your non-standard transaction in a block. If rejected, you will be notified. So essentially, Marathon is filtering the transactions that could go on the network. So if somebody tries to post some kind of CP, some kind of inappropriate images on the Bitcoin network, their transaction is going to be rejected. And you can see that here. If rejected, you will be notified. What Bitcoin Core is doing with Core version 30 is they're opening this up to anybody. They're allowing anybody to permissionlessly send any transaction on the Bitcoin network, and the files that they post on the Bitcoin network can be up to 100 kilobytes, which is going to really open this up to a lot more people posting whatever kind of degenerate filth they want to on the Bitcoin network. And this needs to be avoided. The way to avoid this, again, like I said, was to run Bitcoin knots. Let's go back to the video.
This will teach you how to run Bitcoin knots for free. Blowing out the op-return filter on Bitcoin is such a self-inflicted wound by Bitcoin Core devs. Are you going to be publicly defending these devs and helping them to raise money for their legal defense funds when they get arrested for having written code that turns Bitcoin into a CSAM file relay service? Because
I think that what's happening here is a lot of Bitcoin developers and the maintainers want to leave their mark on Bitcoin. They know that Bitcoin is going to be around for the next 100 years, for the next 1,000 years, until humanity is around. They know that Bitcoin is going to be around, and they want people to refer back to them as the ones who made these use cases possible. And in turn, they're destroying the network. They're ruining how the network works. They're changing how the network works. They're making it so that Bitcoin's main focus isn't to be money. It's being focused on as something completely different. They're focusing on using it as a file storage database, a public file storage database. And that's not the purpose of Bitcoin. If you want a public file storage database, go store your data on a cloud service. Go store your data on a hard drive. Don't use the Bitcoin network to store whatever pictures and videos you want to store. That's not the point of Bitcoin. The point of Bitcoin is to allow people to send value permissionlessly across the world without borders, without having people in the middle stopping you from transacting, without having people question you on your intentions of sending and receiving value. But instead, Bitcoin Core seems to be opening this up to people who are completely going to just destroy the network. And they're going to make it so that Bitcoin is seen as this relay service that allows the worst people on earth to send and receive files using innocent people's computers.
I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be defending anyone who's making it easier to put CSAM on chain as Bitcoin Core is doing these days. Think something like this could happen in America in 2028 if the Dems come back into power. You'll be hearing this from politicians about how Trump made $5 billion from his crypto scams, while Bitcoiners are now sharing CSAM with each other every day and helping to get it published to an immutable ledger.
I don't even think it would be the Democrats that would do this. I think that even Republicans would step up if this were to happen. There are a lot of Republicans who still don't like Bitcoin. There are people across the spectrum who don't understand Bitcoin, and they'll do whatever they can to destroy it because keep in mind that no matter which political party it is, they're working for themselves. They're trying to create more value for themselves. They don't care about Bitcoin. They care about keeping the power that they have. And this doesn't have to be Democrats. It can be either. It can be Republicans, it can be Democrats, it can be anybody in the world with any political views that can see that Bitcoin is being used for this and they can go against it. I don't think that that's a wrong position to take. I think that would be completely right, regardless of your political views. If somebody's using the Bitcoin network to send and receive inappropriate pictures, then you would be right, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you are, to attack Bitcoin.
But don't devs of open source software projects in America have immunity? Please, please don't be so naive. They have immunity, of course, until the public and politicians decide that they don't have immunity anymore. And I'm not going to be the one going to bat for the CSAM enablers. If you think something like this couldn't happen, you're one of those people who pay lip service to adversarial thinking, but never really engage in it yourself. This is the time to be engaging in this kind of thinking. And also, this is another concern I have. Do not use this video to say that I'm attacking Bitcoin Core devs and
People are
opening
doing
them
that
up
to
to a
him. That's
host of
crazy.
legal and personal attacks, because it's the Bitcoin Core devs. They're the ones who are pushing through this contentious change, not me. And nearly 20% of the network has
23.76% now.
were wrong. Or are they going to go the way of ego and shoot themselves in the foot? Because this could get really, really bad, as Beauty On points out here. Disrupting Bitcoin, deliberately making it a tool that can also share illegal images with absolute certainty, will be classed as financial terrorism and network disruption. And the people who wrote the changes will be held liable and up for prosecution. Quote, I just wrote the code and I'm not responsible for what people do with it. That did not work for the developer of Tornado Cash. So don't even think of mounting that as a defense.
The crazy thing is, as soon as this opens up, people will start doing whatever they can with the Bitcoin network, and they'll start sending these pictures on the Bitcoin network, meaning that Bitcoin's reputation is going to be ruined forever. You're never going to be able to get that back. You ruin your reputation once and it's gone. You can't change it back. You can't improve it. You can't fix it. It's gone. Bitcoin will be seen as a CSAM relay service. And that's specifically what it'll be used for. People won't use it as money anymore. They'll find something else to use as money because they don't want to be associated with something like what Matt is talking about here.
These developers will have no excuse of ignorance either, because they've been very publicly warned not to do what they're planning to do. But in a fit of pique, they will have decided to do it anyway. And this will be trivially easy to prove. And therefore, they will be held personally liable in the same way that worm and virus authors are personally liable for the damage they do to other people's networks and machines, simply because they released the code into the wild and other people ran it. Beauty On has another great post I wanted to refer to here. Beauty On writes, the choice is this. Number one, to run Bitcoin software. Bitcoin D just stands for, I believe, Bitcoin daemon, just running the client software. To run Bitcoin software that makes it easier to circulate JPEGs and keep Bitcoin, or to run Bitcoin software, node software that makes it harder to circulate JPEGs and keep Bitcoin. If you can have Bitcoin software without JPEGs, why would you not opt for that? Why would you opt for circulating JPEGs? If your answer contains any of the following words: censorship resistance, you are a Fed, swearing, ad hominem, sub 1 sat per vbyte, you've missed the point.
One of the things that I find insane here is that the people who are supporting Bitcoin Core are saying that this is censorship. They're saying that Bitcoin is supposed to be censorship resistant. And the problem with that is it's like saying that if somebody's sending you unwanted emails to your email address because they got your email address, then you shouldn't censor them. Sending their emails to a spam folder is censorship. That's the equivalent of this. So if somebody is sending non-monetary transactions on a monetary network where the people who use it can set their own use case for that network. The majority of people see Bitcoin as money. If somebody's trying to use it as something that's not money, the Bitcoin Core supporters are saying that that is censorship. They're saying that you don't want people to use Bitcoin. You're killing Bitcoin because now there's not going to be as many use cases. And again, we're going to go through what Citria said here. The goal is to significantly increase transaction throughput and reduce fees, making Bitcoin more usable for a wider range of applications beyond simple value transfer. And how do you know that Bitcoin Core developers aren't being paid by companies like Citria to do this? How do you know that they're not receiving something in the background, under the table, something that sweetens the pot for them and convinces them that this is the way to go? How do you know that they're not being blackmailed? How do you know that maybe they got caught in some kind of crime? And I'm not saying that they did. That's not what I'm saying. How do you know, though, that that's not the case? How do you know that the people who are the maintainers for Bitcoin aren't being forced to do this by, let's say, the FBI or the CIA, and the CIA and FBI want them to do this because they know that it'll reduce the number of people running nodes from their houses. It'll reduce the number of copies of the Bitcoin blockchain and the records of all of the transactions on the Bitcoin network.
Use their equipment and bandwidth to distribute filth as default network policy in an attitude of resigned to evil, quote unquote, acceptable compromise. People, of course, are free to run whatever software they want. You can run the version of Bitcoin software that allows others, and by allowing them, explicitly allows others to dump JPEGs onto your machine, or you can run Bitcoin knots if your sole interest is Bitcoin. It really is as simple as that. Any new version of a client that explicitly allows and encourages JPEGs is making it perfectly clear where they stand, and it's up to everyone to run what they want to run. What you should not do is use technical pretext to cover your desire to distribute CSAM or other forms of bad pictures. You should simply be honest and say, I am for the distribution of CSAM and other bad, nasty things on Bitcoin, rather than couch pretexts in technical virtue signaling.
I think that this is a lot more serious than people think. This could lead to all of your wealth being destroyed if people no longer want to use Bitcoin. But I think that the market is going to correct for this. I think that the market is doing what it can to make sure that this isn't the case. More and more people are becoming aware of this. More and more people are running Bitcoin nodes, and they're running Bitcoin knots rather than running Bitcoin Core. I don't think the people who want to save in Bitcoin want Bitcoin to be used as anything other than money. I don't think they care about the transaction fees that are being generated for miners. Miners aren't the ones that are the leaders of this network. The nodes are the leaders of this network, and anybody can run a node. Anybody who owns Bitcoin, anybody who doesn't own Bitcoin can run a node, and they can enforce the network's protocols. For some reason, it seems like the developers and the maintainers for Bitcoin Core are catering to miners, and they want to ensure that miners keep getting transaction fees and they don't leave. Like I showed you before, the number of people who are mining Bitcoin, the amount of energy being dedicated to the Bitcoin network is constantly increasing. Again, you may not think that this is serious, but I think this could lead to a lot more consequences going forward. If fewer people want to run Bitcoin nodes because the Bitcoin network is used to relay spam and filth, just degenerate pictures, then it'll become easier for the Bitcoin Core team to increase the supply. And we know for a fact that there are people who want to increase the supply. We can see here Peter Todd said that surprisingly, tail emissions is not inflationary. This is one of the most idiotic statements that anybody has ever made. Tail emissions are essentially more Bitcoin being created and ensuring that miners keep getting paid a reward, and that reward keeps increasing. So they want to increase the block reward. These people don't seem to want Bitcoin to be used as money. They want it to be used as something other than money. They want to add as many use cases to it as possible because they think that if Bitcoin is only money, then it's boring. If you want to run a Bitcoin node, you can go to bitcoinknots.org. You can download Bitcoin Knots for Windows, and you can start supporting the network. You can maintain a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain of your own so that you can verify and confirm transactions for yourself. If more people run Bitcoin nodes, the chances of people using Bitcoin to relay pictures that are completely degenerate are much lower, and we protect Bitcoin. We continue to use it as money. If you want to learn how to run Bitcoin knots and how to run a Bitcoin node, you can go to my friend Bitcoin Not Crypto's channel, Forrest Huddle. He has a playlist where he talks about how to run a Bitcoin node. He goes through the entire process. I think that Bitcoin is going to be fine. This isn't a sign that you should sell your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin is going to be safe, but do your part to support the network. Run a node so that the network isn't being used for inappropriate use cases. I don't know if this is a nation state attack. I don't know if the core developers or maintainers are being blackmailed and maybe somebody has something on them and they're forcing them to push through these changes. But regardless of the reasoning behind it, I think that Bitcoin Core is going to lose its crown as the king of Bitcoin implementations as more and more people move to Bitcoin knots.